Well, I'm not sure how you feel about the Antichrist and gender-critical vampires, but I tell you, that's what we're doing here on NEWSPASTY. Look at these two.
Signal is the world's most widely used, truly private communication service. We're not big tech. We're a nonprofit. We don't make money through surveillance, and we offer our services for free because we think everyone deserves the human right to safety, privacy, and freedom of speech.
We sleep upside down in the caves. We sometimes sleep in coffins, and we come towards you like this. If you're wearing a cross.
So I'm here today not as a politician, but as someone who's deeply concerned about one
as a
singular
vampire.
provision in the online
As a lady of the night. No!
that threatens to undermine encryption and fundamental security of the core infrastructure of the UK, but the world around.
That's what we're doing today. We're looking at the online safety bill. Well, the British are putting in, they're saying, we need to stop child sexual exploitation. So that means we need to look at every single part of your life all of the time, whenever we want.
Beyond that.
Damian,
by the way, it's our
what
friends
the
who are
government
doing
is
the child
proposing is
sexual
mass surveillance.
exploitation.
It would hand power to repressive regimes the world over.
No, well, no, I don't accept that. I mean,
Watch the side eye. Here he is. This is Satan himself. He can't look straight at people. He has to look out the side eye. And when he's trying to remember things, for some reason, he's not looking into his brain. He's looking out the side eye. He even agrees with most of what the other person says because he knows it's true. He can't stop him. He just can't stop himself showing what he feels inside while saying the opposite.
What we're talking about is an important but quite small piece of the bill, dealing with messaging services, and it only relates to child sexual exploitation content. So the worst content, where it is not a matter of context, it is without dispute that this content is vile and it is illegal.
Indeed, but it's the worst content that you can find so you can piggyback on the back door of that fear and that risk and that lack of safety, so you can make everybody even less safe.
And what we want companies to do is to use their best endeavors to proactively detect content related to child sexual exploitation so that it can be flagged and investigated.
What do you mean?
Proactively detect means looking through every single one of your messages, whether you like it or not. And do you think they're only going to look for child sexual exploitation images?
Think of what you just heard.
What I can say is that there is no way to create a backdoor that only the good guys can walk through. And what's being proposed here...
Look, he's nodding. Damian's nodding. He's saying, yes, there's no way to do that. We know. That's why we're doing this. Because we're making a back door, you fucking idiots. We got to get in there because all you transgender critical bloody vampires are hanging upside down. I don't even know what you are.
In the context of end-to-end encryption is a backdoor. And we know from decades of history, from decades of serious research, that there's no such thing as a safe backdoor. If the British police can get in, hackers can get in. If the British police can get in, hostile nations can get in.
If British police could get in, a gender-critical vampire could get in, and you don't want that, do you?
British police can get in, Putin could get in, the Iranian government can get in, and others wanting to do harm can get in. So it's really important that we maintain the security and integrity of these systems.
I agree with Meredith on that point. I mean, I don't think it would be safe to say there's a safe backdoor, because once you create it, other people will find it as well.
So they're saying out loud, they're saying we know what we're going to do. That's why we're doing it,
of course. We're not going to ask companies to break.
Of course, whatever.
What the regulator
Bullshit.
would do, I would imagine.
Even she knows. Look at the face there. Look at her face. I mean, what you're saying is, Kathy, even she finds it, this wry smile. Do you really believe what you're saying? Side-eye Collins, Damian, son of Satan, Lucifer himself on earth.
A company like Signal is when the regulator, Ofcom, is creating the codes of practice, they might say to Signal, well, what sort of data do you gather? And if Signal says, well, we don't gather data about people's messages, we can't possibly look at this. The regulator won't say you need to break encryption. It'll say that's fine, but you do have policies, let's say, on legal and appropriate use. How do you enforce those? What do you do?
None of that is specified in the bill, and this is...
So it's bullshit. What you're saying, Damian Collins, is a lie. You're not specifying any of that in the bill. You're not specifying anything. You're saying we need a back door into your messages. We want to know what you're talking about. And we're going to do it on the backs of child sexual exploitation, while all our friends are the ones who are exploiting children and trafficking them. There you go. This is a circle jerk of fucking hate.
Our concern, because we hear, we hear things that are sensible like that from people like you, and then we look at the bill, and what is specified is a regime.
we hear things like that from people sensible like you, and then when we look at the bill, what we see is you all dancing round nude with all naked children around. Isn't that a bit suspicious?
That would give Ofcom the power to demand that everyone in the UK download spyware that checks their messages before they're sent.
Oh, look at his eyes.
Of what is
look at his eyes.
Look at that. And that is a precedent that authoritarian regimes are looking to the UK to set, to point to a liberal.
Wow. You know, I mean, eye movement is a big thing. And he is going in his hands. Look at him, the stress. He's got his hands together. He's rubbing his thumbs together, looking down to the side. I think he believes he's about to be turned by a gender-critical vampire. I think he's sure about it.
Democracy that was the first to expand surveillance in the terms of the UN Human Rights Commissioner. This is unprecedented paradigm-shifting surveillance, and paradigm-shifting not in the good way.
What do you do if there are child abuse images being shared on Signal? What is your, dealing with law enforcement on that point? Or do you just not know?
Look, this gets down to the brass tacks and the facts of, the rules of mathematics, the rules of physics. There is either encryption that protects everyone.
But there's child abuse images that could be shared on your platform that you wouldn't know about, or you would know about, but you won't tell law enforcement.
Right. On this point, then you can say, if you're saying that, child sexual abuse mainly happens in bedrooms, and we don't see inside people's bedrooms. So we should now get to see and record inside your bedroom to make sure child sexual abuse isn't happening. That's all we're doing. We're not doing anything else. We're just looking to make sure you're not abusing children. That's why we got 5 cameras in your bedroom now and 1 in your ass. Yes, we have got the new edition pasty cam. It is all over. It is inside. It is onions, gravies, beef.
There is either a backdoor that lets me and the Russian government and hackers.
She even knows she's a gender-critical vampire. So she's saying, it let me, a gender-critical vampire, or Russians or whatever, into your house. Do you want that? Do you want me biting your neck and turning you?
And we can't look. Encryption either permits me and everyone to look or no one to look.
So if child abuse is being shared on your platform, you don't know.
So if child abuse is going on inside someone's house, you don't know. That's the point of secretive stuff that people do behind closed doors. That is the point. That's the point. There is no right, there should be no right for you to see everything, because you can think up the worst possible thing that can happen. I could say child abuse and then say, and now every law has got to be changed. So we're introducing CBDCs because children and child trafficking is often paid with cash money. So you can't trace it. So we need to introduce CBDCs because of child sexual exploitation. We need to check inside your bum. That's a different matter. I'm just saying. Pasties.
We absolutely cannot know. And look, this is concerning, but there are other law enforcement tools. Look, the independent review of children's social services, the UK's own, recommended $2.6 billion in funding over the next 6 years.
The UK social services! UK social services is a mess. The biggest mess. The people who are in it are detached from reality. There is corruption galore. People getting away with all sorts. People turning a blind eye, and it's been that way since its inception. Since the early 70s. What, 71? It was introduced in Britain, social services, and then it was used as a backdoor route to traffic children from homes into the politicians' sex parties. We know this from things like Kendall House, which I've done the research on, and other places. You know the play. You know, you've already read all the stories, haven't you? You already know. You already know why social services was set up, don't you? You already know. You know why Keith Joseph was put in charge, don't you? to start? You know why the people who were put in charge of places like Kent Social Services by 1974 would say stuff like, men who are attracted to 13-year-old boys make the best teachers. You know why that is. They're a cult.
Years for child,
for
child welfare services. These are the essential services that prevent abuse. What did they get? About 7% of that. So, I champion people like Damian and others really putting the pedal to the metal on this issue and demanding that the government do more.
I think this, Kathy, your question I think is a really important one. I think people need to know, and the regulator will have the right to ask these questions, is you have in your terms of services signal regulations on legal and appropriate use of the service. You don't allow people to use signal to break.
So you have the right, that's a law. So you have a law written down that says you're not allowed to rape children, yeah? And people are still raping children behind closed door. And if you're using the same logic, you're saying that you should be able to look behind everybody's door because you've written a law. We've written a law and that gives us ultimate right. And this is about guarding something from the digital autocracy that's taking shape, because them knowing what we know, people like me, I'm a journalist. I'll no longer be able to hide anything that I'm doing and be able to sneak up on these guys. They will be able to cover up every track. They'll be able to watch me in detail. You want that? You want that? Don't think you do.
Law. So how do you enforce that? What do you do? How do you enforce your own terms of service?
I mean, we can get into a rabbit hole of how one nonprofit enforces or doesn't enforce its policies, but right now what we're looking at is a provision.
No, that's not a rabbit hole, though, is it?
It's quite fundamental. I mean, because I think it's really important that you have those terms of service to say you don't allow illegal.
Well, watch this. She always does this, does Kathy? I mean, it becomes a point where when she has two guests on like this, eventually one guest becomes the presenter and becomes the person asking the questions, and she almost joins their side. So she's now going to be slowly joining into Damian Collins' side because Kathy's for the establishment.
WhatsApp have similar terms of service as well, and I think it's important that people understand how is it enforced.
Absolutely. And that, enforcement happens through law enforcement agencies. Enforcement happens through other mechanisms. We are not an enforcement agency. We are a technology platform. We're a nonprofit. And what we are working to do is provide actually private communication. And look, in the history of human communication, for hundreds of thousands of years, the default was private.
Right.
Yeah,
so
we can't let large
pick up on that.
That's it. The default was private. She's completely right as she rises out of the coffin. He goes, had the low bit of light that's slowly dripping through the curtain. She knows through history. You're not supposed to look in people's letters. You weren't supposed to look in people's mail. You weren't supposed to be listening to people's telephone conversations. You're not supposed to be doing this stuff.
We can't let large tech companies set the norms for surveillance for all of us. Like you and I both need to check these companies on changing the norms for human communication to be completely surveilled by a handful of companies. What Signal is trying to do is keep the default of privacy that has existed through.
And many of your colleagues are in favour of free speech, aren't you?
Well, no, but I think that just this question I think is really important.
Who's asking the question? Who's the interviewer now?
I think we would agree on, and Signal is not
Kathy and Damian.
I think protecting user privacy and minimising data gathering, and that's why so many people, myself included, use Signal. But I think this is really important. This question: if you say in your terms of service that you don't allow illegal use and you don't allow inappropriate use, does that have any meaning?
We enforce our terms of service.
Okay, there's a cut there. They've cut across to Kathy over here. I think that's the name. They cut across to her, squinty eyes, doing squinty eyes, because they've cut it. They've cut a little bit out. But she's not doing the interview, so they're looking at her like she's just asked a question. It was one of her guests who is now asking the question because she's on the government side and the government takes over. The government takes over questioning whether or not they should have the right to surveil it. And he's saying, you got private communications, and if we want to see it, why can't we see it? How can't we see it? If you're doing something naughty, I can't see it. This is the basic understanding of why intelligence services do things surreptitiously, isn't it?
when we have evidence of violations.
But you won't have evidence because you don't know if child abuse images are being shared, because that is
Look, we can't
the core of your privacy.
collapse these issues. What we're talking about is encryption either works or not, right? Over the weekend, I heard about a letter that is being signed by the world's top encryption experts.
Yeah.
These are hundreds of academics at universities across the world, again, reaffirming the expert consensus that
reaffirming the fact that you should not be building a back door for Mr. Intelligence and Mrs. Intelligence after they've spent the past 75 years running roughshod over your rights. Over your rights! Do you know how many pasties have died in the died?
at the level of mathematical laws, encryption either protects people or it doesn't. It is either safe or it is vulnerable. And what's being proposed in this bill, if we can get back to the provision that we're concerned about, is a mechanism that would allow the evisceration of privacy, safety, and encryption.
Okay, answer that last point, because this is about freedom of speech, it's about privacy. That is something that
Here she goes, she's going, because he was about to.
So
he was about to ask the question again, and she's like, "Okay, answer that last point. And what's he going to do?"
It doesn't require the breaking of encryption. The legislation doesn't require that.
It absolutely
it doesn't.
does.
It requires.
Yes, it does.
A door at the back, at the top or the bottom. It doesn't matter where the door is. It's unsafe.
It doesn't require the breaking of encryption. That's why this question about how companies enforce their terms of service.
Again, did you see that? Did you see how much of a cut there was? She's saying something in return, and what he said back in return gets cut out.
Because that is one of Ofcom's principal jobs, is to go to companies and say, that's what you say in your terms of service, what do you do? And I think what Meredith was saying is, if law enforcement came forward with
There's a couple of things here. He still can't look in people's eyes. He's still got a side eye away. He doesn't look up into his brain to record facts very often, that's for sure. His tie goes down to the floor for some reason. And they're cutting what he's saying to make it better for him. And he's the one now taking over, asking all of the questions. This doesn't make any sense, does it? This is what happens when you have the devil in the interview, when you have Lucifer himself on earth, when you have Satan, when you have Damian. With
evidence that suggested someone using Signal was using it to share child sexual exploitation images, Signal would act on that evidence. But
let's just check that is what she was saying.
What Signal would do, would Signal check?
Let's bring in Meredith on this.
I feel like we are circling the drain on this question, and absolutely we would. But what we're talking about has higher stakes.
No, what we're trying to get at here.
Again, a cut. Again, what we're dealing with here has higher stakes. They cut it out, and he said something, and she's laughing at what he said, but we don't get to see it because they cut it out. You're not getting to see news. This is getting to see how they manufacture consent. Bunch of pasties manufacturing consent. Look at this big blow bag blowing out air. Yeah, what a blow bag.
Would Signal do? Because this is fun. This will be the most important bit of the online safety bill. In terms of the day-to-day working of your company with this bill, it will be answering the regulators' questions of how do you enforce your own terms of service.
I think what's important here...
Well, hey, answer that point.
Yeah. We enforce our terms of service when we have evidence that there is problematic use. But we don't... let's get back to the level of...
That's how investigations go. So we enforce laws once we have an idea that a law has been broken. That's how it works. And we don't get to see what people are doing behind closed doors. And once we've seen it, then we can report it, or then we can do something about it. That should be the same online. Why should it be any different in the place where you're having all of your communication and all of your secrets are? Think about it. Think about what they're targeting. Think about what the Antichrist wants to do to this gender critical vampire.
She's answered that question. That you're happy with that answer.
How do you do it? Do you just take the police's word for it?
Again, no, he's still asking all the questions. Who's the presenter here? Who's the presenter? The news. This is Channel 4 News with guest presenter Damian Collins. Damian Collins, today you'll be put up against a gender critical vampire who believes that you should have some privacy. Tell her why you should see inside her vagina.
You want to shadow me at work for a week?
No,
is that what you're asking?
That's an idea.
What I'm saying is, how do you do it? You say you take action, but how?
Again, a cutout, but Kathy said, oh yeah, it's an idea. You should shadow, maybe he should shadow you. Maybe you should look over your shoulder so he knows what you're doing.
Depends opinions on the situation, and we don't discuss confidential encounters with law enforcement.
Do you investigate the account, the user's account?
Absolutely, when warranted, but we're not going into those details. What we are talking about here is the UK is poised to set a damning precedent. If we break encryption in the UK, if this mass surveillance provision goes forward, we have authoritarian countries around the world that are looking to the UK to set the precedent. And let's be real about this.
Completely.
The international human rights organization Freedom House has classified about 40% of the world's population as living under repressive regimes. So we're looking at Iran.
Because we're not going to require de-encryption. What we will require is companies...
Yes, you will. Clarify the bill.
Can it be amended and clarified?
Wow, listen to that cut. Listen to that cut. Let's go back a little bit here. We're not going to demand, Kathy's already laughing. We're not going to demand de-encryption. And then listen to the cut.
But then you need to clarify the bill.
Can it be amended and clarified?
Look at that. Absolutely can be amended and
Suggest
clarified.
an amendment.
Yeah, there's Amendment 205 that clarifies that this provision will not be used to break encryption.
Right, what's
Amendment
wrong with taking out that amendment?
Because
take out the amendment.
We don't need to set out things the bill's not going to do. We set out in the bill the things it is going to do.
What type of political line is that? How much side-eye is he going to do now?
And what it is going to do is require companies to
Lots
use
of side-eye.
Now, there are different sorts of messaging platforms, as I said before.
Is he recalling his memory there?
Isn't encrypted.
Is his brain in his temple?
It can already see
in
and
his
find.
ear.
If a messaging service is encrypted, we're not going to require that encryption to be broken or redesigned. I agree with
that's
what...
a promise from you that there's no evidence in the bill.
If you don't get the amendments that you want to your satisfaction, will you go ahead with your threat to quit the UK?
Look, we will never quit the UK willingly. We believe that everyone in the world...
But unwillingly, you would quit the UK?
We would be forced to quit because, again, there's no such thing as encryption that works for some and doesn't work for others.
Does that concern you, that you've got these big companies? I mean, Signal's not the only one. Clearly, WhatsApp is also threatening to quit the UK. Apple also has concerns. That's hugely concerning for UK PLC, isn't it?
Well, no, it doesn't concern me because they won't do it.
Listen to that. No, it doesn't concern me because we can just get them to de-encrypt and they won't do it. We can get right up in their arsehole and they won't do it because they're greedy capitalists. We all know this. It's a non-profit. Well, in that case, they can go away.
She's just said she will.
Are you calling me a liar,
No.
Yes.
In your case, I don't think you'll do it. You may do it. Is that because...
So you're calling me a liar?
No, what I'm saying is the scenario that you are
I'm not a liar.
I just think you're wrong, with respect. I just think you're wrong. And
You think I'm
Wow,
wrong
wow, this is some pasty on pasty action. This is how ridiculous things get. The presenter lost control of this a long time ago and instead has got on board with the government sort of line of questioning. Yeah, making herself look a little bit unbiased here and there by saying, oh, no, you've got to answer this. But then he turns it around into questions and, oh, my God, he is probably the pasty of the month. Maybe I should call a pasty of the month for the NEWSPASTE. He'd have to be the pasty of the month. Surely he's the pasty of the month.
My own views.
No.
Oh, come on.
No, I think you're wrong in terms of what you'll be asked to do. I think when you go through the process with the regulator of agreeing codes of practice, which will be agreed for individual companies, so Signal won't be treated like WhatsApp and other messaging services.
It'll
be bespoke.
None of this is in the bill. It's absolutely not specified.
What is absolutely specified in the bill is that the regulator's job, once the bill becomes law, is to create codes of practice. Those codes of practice then laid before Parliament.
What is in the bill is that Ofcom could be has the power to require accredited technology. We know the accredited technology that is being developed would create serious backdoors and implement a regime of mass surveillance.
Accredited technology. So the bill says, accredited technologies. What's an accredited technology? Anything we accredit. So anything then. Anything. That's what they're saying. Their back door is we can do anything. As long as we accredit the technology we use. As long as we say Cambridge Analytica are all right. As long as we say Hamilton 68's okay. As long as we say all of these things are fine, then it'll all be fine. And we'll all eat pasty for lunch. We'll have pasty wine and pasty fruits. This gynecological vampire will scissor Damian Collins.
You've made that point several times. I accept your point. I want to stand back for a minute because what I want to ask you, Meredith, is big tech abuses. I'm not holding you responsible for big tech as a whole. I completely understand that. But When you look at the death by suicide of Molly Russell.
Oh, here we go. I'm not holding you responsible for every gender critical vampire. I'm just saying, what about the death of this child, which was so well publicized that it made you think there's something else behind it and they won't let you look into it? Kind of like the Madeleine McCann case. What's next?
Cambridge Analytica.
Cambridge Analytica, which, of course, was an intelligence outfit, really, wasn't it?
The scandalous wholesale misuse of personal data. Is it fair to say that big tech as a whole has brought this regulatory environment on itself?
Wait a minute. How is all of that big tech? Oh, how is all of that big tech?
Well, I absolutely agree with Damian and so many others that big tech must be held accountable. And I think part of what's happening here is that big tech has infiltrated so many areas of our lives that we have collapsed these issues into an omnibus bill with some really great parts and some really disturbing and democracy undermining parts like this.
Yes, there you go. She says it. She says it. Because, you know, big tech is a monster. It's a monster that wants to consume worse than even the government. But both of them together means you get just awful interactions. They don't see where each other are going wrong. And they're just going forward saying, let's devour everything, shall we? Let's just eat it all. Oh, yes, that's a good idea. Let's eat it all. What about that bit over there that's all innocent? I'll eat it. I'll eat it straight away. What does it taste of? I think you can guess what it tastes of. No, I want you to tell me. No, I think you can guess. No, I want you to tell me.
Provision. But I am committed to holding big tech accountable. And indeed, I joined Signal because I wanted to protect people from the kind of surveillance that big tech perpetrates every day. I want to protect.
And they had a rec room with coffins in.
Protect the teens in Uganda, where they just passed a law that makes being gay punishable by murder. I want to protect the young women in Iran who are protesting democracy. I want to protect the people on the front lines in Ukraine who are fighting Putin. And all of this.
She wants to protect everyone on every side. That's what the whole point is. Everybody has the chance to do the right thing and the wrong thing. And eventually it all will out.
Requires on being able to communicate safely and securely outside of this nexus of surveillance.
With this bill, which some of your colleagues say is an illiberal mess, you're punishing the good guys like Meredith.
Well, no, there you go. We're not. I don't know how many times I have to say this. We're not going to require companies to de-encrypt or create backdoors.
To specify that, and I'll go home and we'll all be happy.
So the legislation.
Yes. So specify that within the legislation, and then there is no issue. At the moment, of course, there's an issue because you haven't specified it, so you can do it. So it's in the bill.
Doesn't say that now. So we're not taking anything out. We don't need to, because the bill is really
clear. The broader point, have you, because of the abuses of big tech as a whole, ended up overreaching with this bill?
No,
and it's become a mess. It's become a Frankenstein's monster.
How many? Well, come on, look at the side-eye. Side-eye, there you go. More side-eye.
Is 2 or 3 very important and very simple things.
Damian Side-Eye Collins.
And the bulk of the bill really deals with what we call user-to-user platforms, so social media platforms like Instagram and TikTok and so on.
Ones where you can monitor people.
It says the minimum safety standards that should be set on those platforms should be based on UK laws. And also that the companies should be clear what their terms of service are and that they should enforce them consistently. And that the companies they have liabilities. And in America, this concept doesn't exist. The idea that a platform may have liabilities for how people use their service, even though their business model is built around how people use their service.
But wait. You have to then consider the fact of, are hotels responsible for rapes and abuse? Are people who own a house responsible for rape and abuse if it happens when they've rented a house to someone who raped and abused? This is something that's a lot more difficult than that.
And actively promoting and recommending content to people is fundamental to the way they make money out of their service. That they are liable for that. They have responsibilities, and that is absolutely core. And I would say in the House of Commons, there may be people that raise questions, or as Meredith is doing, about a particular point of it. I think everyone agrees, or I'd say the vast majority of people agree, those principles are right.
Right.
They're all raising the point about the same lack of concise language of ambiguity on the one area that would allow you to do the thing that everybody doesn't want you to do and you want to do. We're not stupid. How many people have got to go through this over and over again? He feels like he got through most of it. He's gripping onto that chair now. He's stopped rubbing his thumbs together. He's stopped sweating so much. He's stopped side-eyeing all of the time. He feels like he's got through it. But what is he saying? What is he saying? Saying the same thing you'd expect him to say. He's pasty talk.
You think you're going to get your way? You're going to persuade MPs like Damian, because he doesn't seem very persuaded by your argument just now.
I hope so, because to me, this isn't a game, right? We are looking at the possible evisceration of privacy and security on which the financial and economic infrastructures rely. And so
he's very beautiful for a gender-critical vampire. And hey, I agree with nearly everything she says. I always think that a president of a company isn't saying the thing they really think. They're saying what the company is supposed to project out, and whether it's then true is something else. But at least someone is championing the people in this regard. I don't hear the people of WhatsApp or Telegram or whatnot doing it, and they should be doing what Meredith Whittaker, however much I take the mick out of her for looking like a gender critical vampire, can I just say you're doing a good job, and we like you here at NEWSPASTY. We like you, Meredith. We like you.
I'm not here as a politician. I really hope that we can look at this rule clearly, that we can wave away the smoke and mirrors, because look, this is real. Like, tech companies sell snake oil all the time from their tech companies sell snake oil, and none of them sell pasties, actually. To Mark Zuckerberg promising that AI is going to solve content moderation.
Thanos to Mark Zuckerberg.
Continually overstate the capabilities of the technology, and that's what's happening here. That's what's happening with these vendors saying that they can break encryption but maintain privacy, that they can make client-side scanning that will work to reveal the bad while protecting the good. It is snake oil. It is not true.
Snake
and every
oil.
expert who is
It's
not
pasty.
invested personally in this project is calling it out as a fallacy.
Okay.
I call pasty oil on you. He's just selling pasty oil around the place.
Final thought, is big tech just too big to regulate? You're bitten off more than you can chew.
Oh, there's a pasty comment there to be had, be sure.
At all. We regulate financial services globally. We regulate complex industries.
Former tech and digital pasty.
The reason we need these regulations in tech is, I think, as everyone can see, sitting down with a tech company and trying to get straight answers to simple questions is very difficult. And that's
You got a few.
That's why we need a regulator that can actually have the legal power to do that and say to a company.
She was accurate and honest. She was accurate and honest. It was you who was lying. She was accurate and honest. You are a dirty, rotten bastard.
If you won't give us the information that we ask for, then you could face criminal sanctions for that.
Damian Collins, Meredith Whittaker, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What we know is that we will end up with many more unemployed